Daniel never raised his voice. Not once in 4 years of marriage. Not when my stepbrother Victor called him too small for our world at Christmas dinner. Not when my family made it clear that a quiet software engineer from a normal family had no place in our empire. He would just smile and say he only wanted me. Not the business. Not the power. Just me. I should have understood sooner what that cost him. My family built their money on luxury real estate. Victor ran the empire the way he ran everything. With pressure, silence, and the kind of fear that never announces itself out loud. From the outside we were untouchable. From the inside we were a family that had forgotten how to trust each other years ago. Daniel was the only person who never played any of those games. That was why Victor hated him. He disappeared on a Tuesday. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you are listening from. Normal evening. I made pasta. We watched something on television I can't even remember now. He said he would be back soon and kissed me on the forehead. His keys were still on the counter when I woke up at midnight and he wasn't there. His phone was off. His office had no record of him. His car was found 2 days later in a parking structure downtown with a full tank of gas and nothing missing from inside. It was like someone had simply removed him from existence. Victor told me to stop. He said Daniel had probably run because he couldn't handle our world. That a man like him was never built for a family like ours. One by one my relatives started repeating that version. Even my aunt, who had danced at our wedding, started using words like difficult and unstable when she talked about Daniel. I went to the police. I hired a private investigator. I drove to every place we had ever been together looking for something I couldn't name. 6 months. Nothing. I was not sleeping. I was not eating properly. I had stopped going into the office. My entire life had compressed itself into one question that nobody around me seemed to think deserved an answer. Where's my husband? The message arrived on a Thursday evening. Unknown number. No text. Just a location pin dropped in the middle of a conversation that had never started. Something in my body moved before my mind agreed to it. I was in my car and driving before I had consciously decided to go. The location was 40 minutes outside the city. An industrial area I had never been to. Warehouses and empty lots and the kind of silence that sits differently than regular quiet. I parked outside a building that looked abandoned. Dust on every surface. Windows boarded from the inside. I stood at the entrance for what felt like a long time before I pushed the door open. I heard him before I saw him. A sound like slow, careful movement in the dark. The kind of movement someone makes when they have learned to be very small. Daniel. He was in the far corner. Sitting on the floor with his back against the wall. 6 months of dust on his clothes. 6 months of something I didn't have a word for yet written into his face. He looked at me the way a person looks when they have been waiting so long they stopped believing the thing they were waiting for would actually arrive. I sat down on the floor in front of him and I didn't say anything because I understood that whatever he was about to tell me needed to come out in his own time. He talked for 2 hours. Victor had gone to Daniel 3 days before he disappeared. Not to warn him. Not to threaten him in any obvious way. Victor was too careful for that. He had presented Daniel with documentation. Financial records. A paper trail that Victor had spent months constructing that placed Daniel's name on transactions Daniel had never made. Accounts Daniel had never opened. Wire transfers connected to 2 of Victor's competitors who were currently under federal investigation. The message was simple and it did not need to be said out loud. Leave. Disappear quietly. Or this goes to the investigators and you spend the next decade explaining yourself to people who have already decided you are guilty. Daniel had believed him. He had believed that Victor had the connections to make it real. That the documentation was convincing enough to destroy him. That leaving was the only way to protect me from being pulled into something I had no part in creating. He had been living in that warehouse for 6 weeks. Before that, a series of cheap motels paid in cash. Avoiding his phone. Avoiding everything with his name on it. Surviving on almost nothing because he was terrified that any financial activity would trigger whatever mechanism Victor had prepared. He had sent the location pin because he had run out of time and options and he had decided that whatever happened next I deserved to know the truth before it did. I sat on that floor and I felt something shift in my chest that I do not have a clean word for. It was not sadness exactly. It was not rage exactly. It was the specific feeling of understanding that someone you loved had suffered enormously to protect you and that the person who caused that suffering had been sitting at your family's dinner table for the last 6 months calling him unstable. I am a corporate lawyer's daughter. I grew up watching my father build cases. I understood documentation. I understood evidence. And I understood that the paper trail Victor had constructed to threaten Daniel could be examined, challenged, and dismantled by people who knew what they were looking at. I made 4 phone calls that night from the parking lot outside the warehouse. I did not confront Victor. I did not warn him. I did not give him the opportunity to prepare. I simply gave everything Daniel had described to the right people and let the process do what processes are designed to do. Victor's documentation fell apart within 3 weeks. The accounts did not hold up to forensic examination. The wire transfer records had been altered. The investigator who reviewed them described the construction as sophisticated but ultimately amateur in a specific way that suggested someone who understood real estate accounting but not federal financial forensics. Victor was arrested on a Thursday morning. At his office. In front of his assistant. I did not watch. I did not need to. Daniel came home the following week. He lost 14 kilograms. He was quiet in a different way than before. The quietness that comes from surviving something rather than the quietness that comes from simply being a gentle person. It took time. More time than either of us had words for. My family called. One by one. My aunt who had used the word unstable. My cousins who had stopped asking about him months ago. My uncle who had told me at Christmas that some men simply cannot handle certain families. I did not answer any of those calls. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. Some doors close because someone on the other side chose to shut them. The only honest thing you can do is let them stay shut. Victor is currently awaiting trial. Daniel is sitting across from me right now reading a book. He still comes home on time. He still cooks dinner with me on weekends. He still asks how my day was. Some things survive everything. Those are the ones worth protecting.